welcome to our podcast. Today we are deep diving into the intricacies of trust in home improvement projects. I'm Anna Scothan, and this episode supports the NHIC's Doorstep Digests, informative guides that help tradespeople and homeowners make well-informed decisions about home improvement. Each digest focuses on a specific topic and provides insights, tips, and practical advice on all aspects of home improvement. I'm pleased that joining me today is Anna Thompson from Local Authority Building Control. Anna, it's lovely to have you here. Could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and the LABC?
Hello, Anna. Yes, absolutely. I am Anna Thompson. I'm head of engagement for LABC, and we work as an umbrella organisation with all of the local authority public service building control bodies around England and Wales.
Fantastic. And so, why is having trust in home improvement projects important?
So trust is so fundamental. When it's your home, it's all your money. It's where you feel safe. It's where you have your family. It's where you absolutely need to be confident that everything around you is absolutely as it should be. The trust underpins that confidence, and that's why you need to find installers who you totally trust. You trust their ability, you trust their ethics, and you trust that they'll deliver you a quality project. So even if it's just a really minor misunderstanding, if you haven't got that trust there, it's really hard to overcome any problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And your home, after all, apart from the fact that, as you say, you feel safe, it's where you feel secure, it's where your family live, where you thrive. It's also the biggest financial asset you will ever take on. It's the biggest debt that you have. And it's important that while, yes, fundamentally you need to protect your family and those living in your home, but you also need to protect your asset and your financial outlay as well.
You do, especially if you're borrowing money. You need to make sure that you're building what you said you were going to build. You need to make sure that you don't do anything that's illegal or unauthorized, because that will affect the future resale value of your property. So yeah, there are huge knock-ons if you get it wrong, and that's why there are lots of people around that want to help you get it right.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's the you mentioned in choosing an installer and having trust in your installer. And it is an ongoing relationship with uh, your tradesperson and different tradespeople that might work on a larger project in your home. And you mentioned the ethics of that person and just explain a bit more what you meant by that.
It's really important that you've got somebody in your home that you trust to be there. So first of all, you need to do your homework about them and make sure that they're an actual company. You'll need to
Yeah.
check out things like the fact that they've got insurance so that if anybody else gets injured in or around your property, it's not you that's liable. They've actually got insurance cover for that. You want to make sure that they're not going to run away with your money, that they're not going to start the project and then disappear and go and work on somebody else's project. There's always an element of that, and it's really hard to completely eliminate any of that risk. But you tend to get a feeling about somebody. If it's somebody who you don't know and you've just seen their van and it's just got a mobile phone number and you can't find out anything about them, that's probably a red flag. That's probably a warning. And that's why if you get recommendations from your neighbours or your family or your friends, that can be a better starting point. You still got to do your homework about them, but at least you know that somebody else has actually worked with them. And hopefully they did actually complete the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if on an initial visit with an installer or a contractor, if they are advocating to you, a potential client, about where you can cut corners, um, you know, I'll do it at the weekend, don't pay VAT, or you don't need to worry about that. Those sorts of things are red flags, aren't they? Because if they're happy telling you how to cut corners, they're happy cutting corners on your job, I would say.
Absolutely. We hear of instances where somebody will have said to a homeowner, do you want to do this with or without building regulations? Like it's a choice. They
Yeah.
either apply or they don't apply, and you don't have any choice about it. There's no sort of different grades of complying. So if any installer ever suggests that it'll be okay, you don't need that, do go and check. Check
Yeah.
with your local authority or look on the LABC front door website. Check whether your project needs permission, whether that's planning permission or building regulations approval, but check it yourself. Don't rely on your installer, because then if your installer says no, it doesn't, and you know it does, that's it. Goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because installers are few and far between and contractors, just because they can be hard to get, it's much better to wait 6 months or even a year to get one that is reputable, trustworthy, um, to actually get the job done properly. Again, your family live there. You need to make sure that the work that is being done is done properly, done to meet safety standards and building regulations, and is going to do what you're wanting it to do safely.
Absolutely. And if you contact an installer and say, can you come and fit this new bathroom for me? And they say, oh, I can do it on Monday. Why can they do it on Monday? Unless there's a really good reason. It's very unlikely. Good tradespeople are booked up months, even
Yeah.
years in advance.
Yeah. I had one recently that, it's going to be at least 18 months before we can get to you will, but we will put you on the whiteboard type answer. And you think, my goodness. And that's why we do such a lot of work trying to encourage people into the industry, because there are huge opportunities for businesses to succeed and grow and do good work. But it has to be people who are professional in it. We don't want lots of people in the industry operating in the grey economy, trying to do things for that, avoiding building regulations, not using compliant products on jobs, things that don't have, meet the right safety regulations and the right UKCA marking, etc., etc.
Absolutely. Do your homework, do your due diligence. Because even if it's a small project, it's all affecting that house, that property that's your big asset. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there are new regulations. We've talked about it on this podcast before. So subscribers and regular listeners will have heard us talk about the Building Safety Act and how that came in October 2022. So it's coming up to, this year it'll be 3 years since that has been enacted. So how is the landscape changing with regard to building safety and also professional accountability? Because there have been some significant changes, and I think a lot of tradespeople are not yet fully up to speed, which is why we're doing so much work in this space with partners like yourselves.
Yes, so there is still misunderstanding. So the Building Safety Act applies to everything. People think it's to do with high-rise blocks of flats only,
Yeah.
and it isn't. It actually applies to every single project on every single type of building. There are some projects where your building control body that you go to is now the building safety regulator at the Health and Safety Executive. So that's for buildings that are higher risk buildings. But for all other buildings, building control is still a thing. Building control still exists as it always has done. So we've got all the different legislation. We've still got the Building Act, and that sort of enabled all the building regulations. That still applies. The building regulations all still apply. All the other documents and standards underneath those and the approved documents, they still apply. But we've got this other thing, the Building Safety Act, which is like an overarching thing. And it's just we're still talking about it as a new act, but it's not, it shouldn't be. Everybody should be really familiar with it. So we're still playing catch up in the industry. I'm doing talks almost every day for different audiences just to
Yeah.
try and get more and more people up to speed with it. But it's a really significant step. And the idea is that it's going to remedy the past shortcomings in the industry by enhancing and beefing up that regulatory framework. It's to make sure that all building professionals, whatever they do, whether they're designing something, whether they're installing something, whether they're checking it, are all meeting higher safety standards. And that, we hope, will make sure that homeowners can have more trust.
Absolutely. And of course, in home improvement projects, quite often the contractor will be designing and installing. So it's even more important for tradespeople that work in home improvement to understand what their responsibility is now compared to how it had been in the past. But there's also additional responsibility for the homeowner, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a completely new way of working, really. So installers have to adhere to all these relevant regulations and standards, um, and also tell people that they're going to do that, which is why we always encourage people to have a contract, have
Yeah.
something in writing to say what their intentions are, make sure they're absolutely clear about what you want so there's no misunderstandings. But the Act has got new requirements and new responsibilities for homeowners, for residents to as the client, you are the client, you're not just the person that owns the house, you've got an official title as the client, and you have to make sure it's your responsibility to make sure that you've made suitable arrangements for planning the project, managing the project, or appointing somebody to do that for you, monitoring the project to make sure it's going along the right lines, and make sure it's compliant with the regulations. And you'll think, well, that's building control's job. It isn't. It never has actually been building control's job to ensure compliance. It's always rested with the person responsible for the work or the person carrying out the work. But we've got these new roles now. We've got the client, we've got the principal designer. So that's your architect, the person that's drawn your plans. We've got the principal contractor, your builder. There will be other contractors, but there will be a principal contractor. But that could be you. If it's a DIY job, there may not be another person to be the principal contractor. You might have chosen to build your project using a building notice, which doesn't require plans to be approved in advance. So you may not have an architect involved. You might not have a designer, in which case the builder, the person carrying out the work, takes on the responsibility for the design because they effectively make it up as they go along. So they then become the principal designer. So everybody has to make sure they know what their proper role is in this, and be prepared to sign forms that say at the end of the job, yeah, as the client, I'm happy that this all meets the requirements, that my principal designer is happy, and that my principal contractor is happy. And you won't get your completion certificate at the end of the job unless those have been signed by the right
Yeah.
people. So be aware of it in advance, and then it won't come as a shock when you're asked to prove that that's happened.
Yeah. And what are some typical, so again, we're not talking about high risk buildings. So what are some typical jobs that will be affected by these new changes, and how would a homeowner and a tradesperson, how would they navigate those changes?
Okay. So obviously anything new that you're building, if you're building a new house, but also if you're converting areas that weren't habitable before. So if you're going to convert your garage into a dining room, if you're going to
Yeah.
convert your loft into a bedroom, or you're just going to change the layout of the building. So even taking out a wall between two rooms in your house needs building regs approval, so this applies. So the person who designs your beam, if that's the only input you're having from a designer, they would be the principal designer,
Yeah.
and they need to be aware of that. And if you go to somebody and say, can you do me some calculations for this beam, and by the way, I'll need you to sign this form, if they won't sign it, find a different one. Okay, because
Yeah.
a good engineer, a good architect, a good technician, a good plan drawer will be prepared to take that responsibility, because it's their responsibility. So anything that you do, your extensions, your new garage, anything that you build, does need to comply, and you do need to bear in mind the Building Safety Act that applies to you.
Yeah. And so anything that is changing the layout, the internal layout of a bit of a home,
Mhm.
um, and changing the use of those rooms like that aren't habitable before, like a loft or a garage, and now you're wanting to put a dining room or a bedroom or something like that in. is all is the term notifiable works? Is that, am I using
Yeah,
the right
it
term
is.
for
Yeah,
that?
notifiable
Yeah,
is fine. It's
yeah,
just work that the building regs are applicable to. But it could even be things like if you're creating a new ensuite bathroom in the back of your bedroom, you could be putting a toilet in the cupboard under the stairs.
yeah.
So anything involving new drainage, that would be notifiable works as well.
And can people come, where would people go to help to start off with? How would I know you've got a lot of advice on local authority building controls website front door. Would you recommend that as a place to go?
Word front door is
Yeah.
written really simply. It uses as little confusing terminology as we can. It explains everything, I think. There are lots of different sections. There are different projects. You can search by the type of project you're doing. And the other thing is that you can then find contact details for your local authority building control team so that you can get in touch with them and ask them specific questions about your own project. There's even an Ask Anna function. So if you can't find what you're looking for on the front door website, you can ask a question and we'll try and answer it as quickly as we can for you.
Great, that's fantastic. That's a brilliant resource. And as well, that is where, again, we're circling back to the purpose of this podcast, which is talking about why trust is important, because you should be able to have these kinds of conversations with your contractor, with the person that's coming to do the work in your home. And you should feel confident in their understanding of the issue so that they're able to um, give you confidence in their answers, that they understand what their responsibilities are, what your responsibilities are, what needs to be signed, what doesn't need to be signed, etc., etc.
Don't forget, you've also got responsibilities to them. So you've got a responsibility to be a good client.
Yeah.
So be clear, explain what you want. Don't keep changing your mind without expecting the price to change. And then
Mm,
pay them. When the job's done, when it's been signed off by building control if it needs it, or when you're happy with it, or you've had somebody else independent to look at it. Pay them. Don't expect to hold money back. But by the same token, if they ask for lots and lots of money up front and you're not sure what for, ask questions and do query that.
yeah, yeah. So there are various challenges facing the home improvement industry at the minute, and this is just one of them. And I think one of the major challenges that we face continually, irrespective of new regulation or regulatory changes or anything like that, is the fact that there really is a two-tier system within home improvement. There is a regulated market, which is what we've been discussing this morning, in this episode, and there is an unregulated market. And I think that that is a real challenge for us as an industry, but I think it really diminishes trust and it makes it harder for those tradespeople that do work within the regulated system, that it makes it harder for them to do business. So could you just talk a little bit further about that?
Yes. So we used to call them cowboy builders. Everybody knew what a cowboy builder was, didn't they? Um, it's one and the same thing. So anybody that isn't prepared to play by the rules, anybody that isn't prepared to get qualified, why would you use an electrician who isn't qualified, isn't a member of a competent person scheme, so they can't self-certify anything? Why would you use them over somebody who you met in the pub or whose name you got off a van? And usually the reason is just the price. But there's a reason why things cost more. So using somebody who is qualified, who is competent, who's accountable, who's a member of a competent person scheme, who will then have its own setup for checking ethics and financial probity and things like that. That really, really helps you make a good decision.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier around that a homeowner, as the client, has obligations to the tradesperson. And I mean, it sounds quite simple, but we do often hear from tradespeople, of clients where they've done a completely good job and then for a little bit of snagging, withholding the whole contract value and things like that. So things are, you know, the client, some people joke the client is always right, but sometimes the client isn't always right. And we do need to recognize that as well. But a contract is beneficial both ways because it does talk about obligations and expectations that the tradesperson has of the homeowner as well as the homeowner having of the tradesperson. What are some of the things that we should be looking for in things like that?
So making sure that, for instance, in your contract, you can specify the hours that you'd like them to work. So you can say, right, we're not allowed to make noise on a Sunday, for instance. But also our neighbours have got young children, so we're going to stop making noise after a certain time because they go to bed. And you can put things in that actually make everybody's life more pleasant. You can say, make sure they need welfare facilities. So you either need to let them use your toilet or you need to be prepared to pay more money so they can have a mobile toilet in the garden. You can't expect people to not have any facilities. They need somewhere, if they're working outside on something, they need somewhere warm and dry occasionally, because they're human beings doing a job.
Yeah.
So a lot of those things, and you can download lists of things that your builder will need. So, for instance, we've heard of people charging their builder extra to use their water or use their electricity, and you think, is that really reasonable? I mean, it's your job, it's your project, you want it to go well. Why not make life easier for everybody and just talk about things? There are some people who are very prepared to get litigious very quickly, and that doesn't help anybody. So sit down and talk. Go somewhere that isn't the middle of your kitchen that looks like a war zone. Have a conversation. You can have mediation from outside. There are people who will actually work with you, or you could just employ a project manager at the beginning of the job who will then do all of that for you, and they will look after both sides and make sure that everybody gets what they need out of the contract and the arrangements and then the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's definitely better, as with lots of things, it's better to do the talking at the front end of a project than having to, it's very naive to go into a project thinking everything's just going to be fine because, you're hoping it does. I think the more planning and understanding you have, and the more that it is written down at the front end, especially for big projects, then the better you're going to be because everybody understands where they are and what they're doing. And yeah, it's just going to be much much easier that way round. So have
The other important thing is allow a contingency fund. Whatever you do on your house, whatever project you're doing, there will be unforeseen things that you can't tell need doing until you've taken it apart and started redoing it. So make sure that you've allowed enough money in your budget, not just to pay for the bare minimum, but allow a bit extra, allow 10% extra, which,
yeah,
if you're just refitting a cloakroom isn't very much. If it's for £100,000 extension, you need to have another £10,000 available
yeah,
for deeper foundations, for having to reinforce the floor slab, for all of those things that you perhaps hadn't foreseen.
yeah, absolutely. And just quickly, I know we have touched on the Building Safety Act and things, but does that change some of the key obligations and expectations for installers and residents?
Should do. It should make sure that everybody's agreed their role in advance,
Yeah,
with less ambiguity. It should ensure that everybody has agreed what and when people will be paid. It should ensure that people agree to follow the plan, assuming there is a plan. So
yeah,
the homeowner needs to make sure the builder's got the right copy of the plan. That happens quite frequently. So if you've got information, pass it on. Make sure everybody's in the loop, and then there'll be again fewer surprises. Less things will go wrong. And at the end of the job, when you're signing these forms that say we're confident that this project complies with the requirements of the Building Safety Act and the building regulations, there's far more chance that that's actually the case.
yeah. And I think even though, I mean, obviously we've talked about projects that require approval and sign off things, and there are projects that don't require, that you can just have done on your home. But it's still important that they're done properly, and that these processes are in place, even if it doesn't have to have the signing at the end of it. Would you agree?
Absolutely. If you look
Yeah.
at how much money people spend on a new patio, you've got a new patio, beautiful Indian sandstone. It can cost thousands of pounds. It doesn't need building regulations. You don't have to sign these forms, but you still need to be confident that your landscaper has done this before. Go and look at a project that they've done somewhere else. If they won't tell you about any other previous projects, walk away from them or shut the door. So yeah, there are lots and lots of projects inside your house. So you might just be retiling your bathroom. You might be replastering. You might be putting down a new floor. Bear in mind, some new floors and things do need building regulations, but in the main, a lot of things that go slightly beyond decoration, they're still really expensive things, and you still really need to do that due diligence before you appoint somebody.
Yeah. And especially in bathrooms, I think, because, water can be an absolute real nightmare, and
Yeah.
you often see people saying, "Oh, I'm having to go at tiling the bathroom or something," and you think, "Oh, good, so you don't mind, water falling through into your kitchen or something,"
Exactly. And
because
particularly now everybody
it's
wants a wet
nuts.
room. You want a wet room, but you don't want the room below to be wet as well, do you?
Yeah.
So,
And once water and damp gets in, it can be a real challenge, as we know. So,
yeah.
is there anything that you sort of key takeaways or signposting that you want our listeners to take away from this, and just to kind of wrap up for us around why trust is important, and how both sides are responsible for helping to build that trust?
Sure. So if you want to find out more about, we've talked about the Building Safety Act, and obviously you can find all about that on the HSE website. So look up the Building Safety Regulator. That will tell you everything you need to know there. If you need things distilled down a bit, have a look at LABC Front Door. There are lots and lots of websites. So all the competent person schemes, they will talk about how they are impacted by the Act and how their installers are now doing things differently, hopefully. So the more you know, the more research you've done, the more confidence you're going to have in the person that you appoint, or doing it yourself. But even most people that do a job themselves will still get subcontractors in to do little elements of it, and all of those count. So do your homework. Don't jump into things. Don't do things just on a nod or on the basis of a phone call. And just remember that not every builder is a cowboy. Not every installer is out to get
Definitely
you.
not.
Most of them are really good. It's just
Yeah.
that the bad ones are the ones that make the headlines. So
Yeah.
don't be that headline.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for these insights today. And to our listeners, please do remember that choosing the right professionals and understanding your mutual obligations can really enhance the success of your home improvement project. So, for any more information on navigating home improvements with trust, please visit our website and also check out the NHIC's Doorstep Digests. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you more insightful discussions in our next episode. Thank you.